Hopefully my battery doesn't get too low. All right, so chapter 7 here. Hopefully this works okay. All right. But, okay. So kids, here we go. All right. So guys, Washington. George Washington, the first president, he works to unify the country. He works to, he travels to all 13 states. And as he travels about, people invite him in for dinner. People invite him in to stay. And he feels like the first president, because we really were 13 individual colonies that didn't get along. He really does feel like it's his obligation to accept these invites and to come in. And there's actually this letter he writes to his wife about how like he feels like he's kind of obligated to accept people's invitations in when he can, but like they often, I guess he's more upper class and he doesn't like the food they're serving oftentimes. But anyways, remember we really were 13 colonies that didn't get along. They were settled by different people for different reasons with different motives, and we're coming together as one country. And George Washington's trying to be that unifying figure. One of the things he does is the Judiciary Act of 1789 here. Remember, the Constitution doesn't talk that much about the courts. For example, it doesn't say how many people are in the Supreme Court. Nowhere in the U.S. Constitution does it say there's 9 justices. In fact, it's actually changed a little bit over the years. It hasn't changed in a long time, but it did change a lot in the 1800s, for example. In the 1930s, FDR tried to pack the Supreme Court, and people threw a bloody fit over it, right? Here's another thing. The U.S. Constitution does not say anywhere that the Supreme Court has judicial review. The right to strike down laws is unconstitutional. The Supreme Court kind of just grabs that out of thin air, So anyways, but the Judiciary Act of 1789 helps set up the Supreme Court and some other courts because the Constitution is very vague on the courts. Very vague on the courts. Now guys, George Washington's officially not a member of either party, the Federalists or the Jeffersonian Republicans. He's not an official member of either party. However, a lot of historians, they kind of call him a Federalist because he just tends to side with the Federalists more. Often. Most of the time. By a lot. Guys, to help unify the country, the national government assumes the states' debts. They take on the debt of the states. The national government says, hey, we fought this revolution. Why? For all of us. And most of the debt was from the revolution. Therefore, it's a national government expense. Make sense? That's also a way of kind of putting the national government kind of above in some ways. You see what I'm saying? He creates the first national bank, George Washington. This is controversial. And it was so controversial they could only get enough votes if they did it on a 20-year charter. Meaning it expires after 20 years. They can renew it. But this is then, hey, we're not creating an eternal monster that's going to last forever. If we don't like it, we just won't vote for it again, and it automatically dies. And that's actually what's going to happen. There'll be a second one, because when the first U.S. bank dies, so does the economy. So they quickly make a second one in a few years. But, there we go. All right. Any questions so far? Am I going too fast? Guys, tariffs. Back then, they didn't have personal income taxes. That's more of a modern thing. Think like 1913 for that. But how did the government get its money? From tariffs, which are taxes on imported goods. Taxes on goods made in other countries brought in tariffs. And now the people who support tariffs, they tend to say, yeah, tariffs are great. Because, hey, think about it. Hey, it gives money for the government. Now the government can do things. And, hey, it promotes American industry. Well, how does it promote American industry? Nitya's making a factory here in America. Back in the revolutionary period, the late 1700s, early 1800s after the revolution, France, England, Europe, they had manufacturing up running before us. It's cheaper for them to do it. We're starting from scratch. So Nitya, she's at a disadvantage in some ways. Her factory makes stuff more expensive than over in Europe back then at the time. Is that going to make sense what I'm saying? So then what people support tariffs say, hey, if we put a tariff on foreign goods, that forces Americans to buy more American goods because it gives her a bit of an advantage making stuff here in America and helps the American business out. And then Nitya hires people like Hayden. And now Hayden has an American job in manufacturing. And that's good. That's what people say. Does that make sense? You guys see the logic behind tariffs? Here's what people who oppose tariffs tend to say. Oh yeah. Now think about this a second. Here's the kind of the logic against it. Dominic, do people like buying cheap stuff? People like cheap crap, right? That's why Walmart's in business, right? People like cheap crap. Do you like the idea of putting taxes to raise the price of goods on European goods if that means you have to buy more expensive European goods or more expensive American goods? A lot of people say no. You see the point though? So it's a double-edged sword. Some people say, well, isn't it better for Americans just to make what they're best at and have cheaper goods overall? And people say, no, we need to protect the American jobs. No, we need to protect American businesses. Makes sense, kids? But he puts tariffs on some things. Here we go. Conflict between France and Britain. France and Britain, I think you go to Europe today, and kind of the thought is America's always at war. America's always getting, involved militarily somewhere. For most of U.S. history, the American mindset was Europe's always at war. Europe's always getting involved somewhere they don't need to be involved in. And France and Britain are at war again. And France and Britain are in conflict. And Britain says, we're your parent country, Chloe. You need to come and side with us. You Americans need to take our side and help us fight France. And France says, no. We helped you win the American Revolution. Our Navy was sent over to help you win the American Revolution. We're a republic. You're a republic. Britain's a monarchy. You need to take our side. And Washington's kind of have the opinion of, we're going to take nobody's side. We're going to sit this one out. And that ticks both Britain and France off. And both Britain and France get upset about this. France sends this guy named Citizen Genet over, and he tries to rile up anti-British sentiment. And he has like these mock executions. They get like a dummy that's supposed to be like the king, of England, and they have like a little guillotine, the dummy, like in like New York City and Philadelphia and things like that, and it riles up people. And they talk about how bad the British are, and Washington tells them to cool it. Luckily, for Washington, Citizen Genet, the French Revolution's horrific. And they're literally they start killing people for thought crimes. Literally thought crimes. They kill even children for like taking anti-revolutionary positions. The French Revolution's a bloody mess. They actually, at one point, the French Revolution, they take all these priests, they put them on this boat, they chain them to the boat, and then they drill a hole in the bottom just to kill all these priests at the same time. It's horrific, the French Revolution. And the French Revolution starts eating its own, and Citizen Genet somehow runs afoul of the French Revolution, and they call him back, and it's kind of obvious he's likely to be put on trial where, he's not going to have a fun time. Let's just say he'll get separated from himself. And Washington's like, if you don't cut it out, I'll send you back. But you can stay if you just cut out all the riling up Americans to try to go to war with Britain. The French Revolution, France says, look, we have a treaty. We have a treaty, and the treaty says we're allies. One of us goes to war with Britain. Boom, done. And Washington says, no. We made that treaty with King Louis. Where is King Louis? Yeah, he's dead. He's in pieces, literally. And you know what? That means our treaty's in pieces. Technically, Washington's legally right, because the European tradition was a new king comes to power. All the old treaties are void. You have to make new treaties. Technically, Washington's right. Sorry, our treaty's void once you had King Louis get cut in two. And poor Marie Antoinette, too. And oh, yeah. All right. Now, guys, John Jay's treaty. Britain is acting aggressive towards this, too, and saying that they want to declare war on us. And Washington, this is the most unpopular thing he does. I think it's probably the right move, but it's the most unpopular thing he does as president. He signs John Jay's treaty, which prevents war with Britain. We have to pay Britain some money we owed them from before the revolution. They're going to pay us some money from boats they stopped at, our American boats that they stole cargo off of. But here's something interesting, how it kind of portrays to Michigan history. You probably don't need to know this for the AP exam, but I'm sorry, I didn't hear what they said. But there's fort possession. Britain holds forts on U.S. soil. When the Treaty of Paris is signed in 1783, which officially ends the revolution, Britain admits her independence. Our borders look like this. Starting right here in the armpit of America, Ohio, it goes up like this. And then down, and then we don't have Florida, that's Spain. And we don't have a single inch of land on the Gulf Coast. And this had been France, but then it goes to Spain, and then it goes to France, but right now, it's during Washington's presidency, it's at Spain at the moment. But then our west coast is the Mississippi River, because we don't have out to the west coast yet. And then it goes up to here, and then back over in Michigan. And so there are forts out west, including at Mackinac. A lot of you, it's a popular vacation place, the Straits of Mackinac, right? I'm sure a lot of you kids have either went there or passed through there on the way to the UP, right? And you know how there's a fort just to the west, just to the side, if you're heading up to the UP, just to the left of the bridge? That fort was initially made by the French, but remember, the 7 Years' War, the French get kicked out. The British have that fort now. And during the Revolution, the British, they're probably wrong, Americans probably pose no threat to it, but they thought this fort is vulnerable to American attacks. So the British take what they can from that fort, burn down the rest, and then build a fort on Mackinac Island to kind of reposition themselves in a safer position from the Americans. And so the British build that fort there. But then after the Revolution, Britain's like, this is a strategic place. It's out in the middle of nowhere, but it's strategic because you kind of control the trade if you control the straits. And it's strategic. And they're like, well, we promised by treaty to give it back to America, but we're actually just going to keep it. We're out here. You're going to send an army and attack us and risk a second war with us, one that you might lose. And if you lose, you might lose part of your country. You might lose all of your country. And so Britain's just like, we're going to hang on to it. John Jay's treaty, Britain's finally out of Mackinac. Make sense? You probably didn't need to know that, but it's interesting history since you guys are from Michigan. And you probably have heard some of that before if you travel up there and go to the forts. Anyone ever been to one of those two forts? Heck yeah, tear it up. Good deal. It's kind of neat, isn't it? Yeah. All right, now guys, Pinckney's treaty with Spain. Spain now controls Louisiana, and it's going to go back to France soon. But Spain now controls Louisiana, and here's the problem. Remember, we don't have planes. We don't have trains. We don't have automobiles. How do you travel deep inland back then in a vast wilderness continent? Boat. Up rivers, right? Boats. And so here's the Mississippi River. This is our western border. But you see right here, we don't control anything on the Gulf Coast. Therefore, we don't control the mouth of the Mississippi River. And so we don't have access. If we want to develop this land, we need the riverways. And so what Washington does is he works out a peace treaty with Spain, and part of the peace treaty with Spain, that we're not going to attack them and this and that, but part of the peace treaty with Spain is they promise us full use of the Mississippi River. They're not going to use the mouth of the Mississippi River to block our trade, to block our boats, to block our farmers who are trying to develop land out west from going down. Does that make sense? Heck yeah. Waterways are important back then, right? Make sense? Heck yeah, kids. Whiskey Rebellion. Any questions? Am I going too fast? Doing good? Whiskey Rebellion. This is a rebellion. We're going to watch like a 1.5-minute video on it tomorrow. But kids, this is the rebellion that proves the U.S. Constitution is strong. Whereas the Articles of Confederation failed to put down Shays' Rebellion, the U.S. Constitution quickly puts down the Whiskey Rebellion. Farmers out in western Pennsylvania, they would take their excess wheat and turn it into whiskey. And then they would take it. Pennsylvania is very mountainous. Anyone ever driven out east through Pennsylvania? Lots of mountains, right? Just up, down, tunnels through mountains and things like that. And so they typically just take one trip a year to eastern markets, sell their whiskey, one load full of whiskey, which they can make more money than off wheat, and then go back. And when they tax this whiskey, it makes them upset and they rebel. And they tar and feather tax collectors on the whiskey tax. And Washington raises an army, sends it out there, and what happens? The rebellion just scatters. They don't even need to fight anyone. Just scatters. The U.S. Constitution held firm in its first test. Makes sense? Passed its first test. Whereas the Articles of Confederation failed its first test. Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, they get into this feud. And a lot of people fault Washington. I think he's a good president, Washington, overall. But a lot of people fault Washington because his cabinet is constantly fighting. Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton. And you see the first political parties forming at this time. And last but not least for Washington, Washington has the most famous farewell address of any president. He tells Americans there's 3 things that we should do. There's 3 big things he tells Americans that we should do in the future when he's no longer president. Number 1 is he says, don't join political factions, also known as political parties. He says you'll be more loyal to your party and what's best for your party than loyal to your country and what's best for your country. Number 2, real quick, do you think we've listened to him on that? Number 2, he says, don't rack up lots of debt. A large national debt will eventually catch up to a government. And they're going to have to the only way to get really out of a large national debt is inflation, which crushes the average person. Don't rack up a large national debt. Eventually it's going to catch up, and you're probably going to have to inflate your way out of it, which crushes the average person. Have we listened to Washington on that? The third big thing he says is the U.S. should avoid foreign entangling alliances because America could easily get sucked up into needless foreign wars, and that wars should be avoided when possible, and that entangling alliances will make us get into wars that are easily avoidable, that we should avoid, and then we just get sucked up, and next thing you know, we're fighting in a war unnecessarily. Do you think we listened to him over the years on that? Avoiding foreign wars that aren't necessary? So, we didn't listen to him. Is that because it was bad advice? I can't help but feel like it might have been better if we listened to him on some of those things, right? I don't know. But that's just me. I don't know. But does anyone know who gets the second most famous farewell address of any president? Oh, somebody whisper something? Lincoln doesn't get to give one because he gets shot in the head? No, but that's not a bad guess, though. No, because Lincoln's famous. Lincoln's a big guy. No, that's famous. No, I mean, that's not a bad guess. That's not a bad guess, but he didn't know it was his last day in office. No, it's not bad, though. Anyone know? He dies in office, too. He gets dies. No, but that's okay. He dies in office, too. In fact, I once had like an assignment, which was pretend FDR doesn't die, and what would his farewell address be? Is it? Guys, Eisenhower, who wins the 1952 and 1956 presidential elections, so that means he's president from like January 20th, 1953 to January 20th, 1961. He gives his farewell address. And he says a couple different things, but the thing that everyone remembers the most, which makes it the second most famous, he says, be wary of the growing industrial military complex, that there's these big businesses that are making money off war, off selling stuff to the military, and they're getting bigger and stronger, and that they're kind of ingrained in Congress through connections, and that they'll get us sucked into wars that we don't need to be in. It's going to take your freedoms, and it's going to cost you your life potentially, and this and that, and that we need to be wary of this growing industrial military complex that we never had before World War II, that we now have after World War II, and it's growing and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And there are a lot of people who say, that's good advice, but we also didn't listen to it. I don't know. But have you guys ever heard of that? The industrial military complex from Eisenhower's speech? You've heard of that saying? Okay, so a few of you have heard of it. Yeah. All right, kids, do you want to look at documents as a short break, or do you want to just knock out the other part we're doing today?
Knock it out.
Knock it out? Oh, you guys are aggressive and violent. Knock it out. All right. Oh, yeah. Now, kids, we are talking about the first two political parties in U.S. history. The Federalists and the Jeffersonian Republicans. The first two political parties. Oh yeah, don't you know? Kids, we're going to tear this up. Hey, do you want to see like a little evolution of the political parties real quick? Little map? Oh yeah, look at this. Look at this map. Oh, and it's already got some control plus up on this? Oh yeah. Now kids, look at this. Colonial era. This is the Revolutionary era. The Whigs want to break off. The Tories want to stay as part of the British Empire. And so they have kind of the Whigs winning. And then when the party's on top, it means they're in power. And when the party's on bottom, it means they're no longer in power. See the years on the bottom? And so you have the Federalists in this reddish color here. And this party's a bit weird because they keep changing their names a lot. Anti-Federalist, Republicans, not to be confused with the modern Republicans, so most historians call them the Jeffersonian Republicans. Then they call themselves the Democratic Republicans, and then they call themselves the Democrats. And this is the Democratic Party of today. The Democratic Party of today can trace its lines all the way back to Thomas Jefferson. Now, if you're wondering, does the Federalist mean that's the Republicans? Not really, but kind of. The Federalists die off. And they kind of get reborn again as the Whigs. And then the Whigs die off. And then the Whigs kind of get reborn again as the Republican Party in 1854, which is the modern Republican Party. Now, it's not 100%, but there are Federalists who, when the party dies off, later in life become Whigs. And there are Whigs who, when the Whigs die off, later in life become Republicans. One example of that is actually Abraham Lincoln. He was a Whig. The Whig Party died off. Later became a Republican when the Republican Party formed. And the Republican Party in the mid-1800s have a lot of the same policy positions as the Whigs. And the Whigs have a lot of the same policy positions as the Federalist political party. Does that make sense? And so let me just scroll on here. Oh, yeah. Look at this. Let me just keep scrolling. Oh, yeah. And you see right here, the Federalist Party dies off. And it's called the Era of Good Feelings, one-party rule. And then the Jeffersonian Republicans break into the Democrats with Andrew Jackson. and that is the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party, the Democrats of today, they are the oldest political party in America that's still alive. There's no older political party in the United States than the Democratic political party. They date back all the way back. And then the National Republicans, those are the old Federalists. They kind of creep back in, and then they become the Whigs. And then the Whigs die off, but most of them become the Republicans, and that is the modern Republican Party of today. Now, I just want to point this out, kids. Now, just because, and we're going to go over what the Federalists believe and what the Jeffersonian Republicans believe, and I've had kids, even after I give them this disclaimer, be like, that's not true because Barack Obama didn't believe in that, and you said he's technically the party of Jefferson. I'm like, candidates change their positions, politicians change their positions, parties change their positions. When you go back over 200 years, sometimes there's so much change it's hard to recognize. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Now, let me just give you some real life examples. Real life example. 2008, when Barack Obama was running for president in 2008, his official position and the Democratic Party's official position was that they were opposed to gay marriage. One man, one woman, that's marriage, period, boom. They talked about like treating people with respect and things like that, but they were officially opposed to actually having like a legal marriage for gay people. When Barack Obama ran for re-election in 2012, he changed his position. It wasn't the same position. He came out for gay marriage. And the Democratic Party put it in their platform in the year 2012 that they support gay marriage in their official platform. So in my lifetime, I've seen a party change position. Why am I bringing this up? Because when you're going back over 200 years, lots of things change. New issues come, old issues kind of die off. Does that kind of make sense? You've seen issues change in your lifetime. I don't know if you guys noticed this. I think it was for 48 years. The Democratic Party's official platform was opposed to new nuclear power plants. I don't know if you noticed this, but in 2020, the Democratic Party took that negative language towards nuclear energy out of their platform and put a neutral language towards nuclear energy about how it might be a possibility for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Parties change their positions. My wife, she works in Holland now, but she had worked for Muskegon for like 17 years at the same company, and she said, I'm probably getting off topic now. Do you want this last example or no? Yeah, right. She said most elections would come and the office wasn't 100%. The office was not 100%, but the office was majority Republican when elections would come. And she worked in the office, and most of the factory floor was pro-Democrat Party. So most of the office was Republican, not 100%. Most of the factory floor, not 100%, but most of the factory floor was pro whoever the Democratic candidate was. She said Donald Trump came along in 2016, and the office, which is typically mostly Republican, were like, dear Lord, oh my God, what is this guy? And then the factory floor, which is typically mostly Democratic, we're like, yeah, Trump, yeah, he's gonna save our jobs from outsourcing to China and this and that. And she said like the office and factory floor. I don't work there, but I believe she's a keen observer. I'm sure she's right, but she said like it was a flip, like what the office typically supported and what the factory floor, they kind of like flip flopped almost, like. And she's like, I've never seen anything like that, She's like, holy crap, But so I just want you to realize things do change, right? Because I have kids who then start like, oh, that's what Democrats will argue for that today. This works. How dare you? All right, you guys ready? Oh, yeah. Here we go, guys. Early political parties. Look at this. The blue are the Federalists. The green are the Jeffersonian Republicans. I already kind of explained this first one here, talking about how the parties kind of come and go, change names, or die off. But you guys can make this if you want, this little table if you want. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, don't you know, kids? Heck yeah. Kids are tough history kids today. Don't worry, tomorrow it's a much shorter lecture than today. And no lecture on Friday. Next week we don't have Friday, right? So we lose another class period, right? Next week? Because there's exact right paragraphs on all you kids. For Thursday? Oh, because we've lost a couple Fridays already or whatever? Okay, it's possible. They have done that in the past, some years. Or then what they'll do is like the Thursday half day coming up in like 2 weeks or whatever, 3 weeks for parent-teacher conferences. So we'll kind of change that. All right, so guys, the Federalists in blue, Jeffersonian Republicans in green. And guys, look at this. Who are the big leaders of the Federalists? Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, John Adams. Who are the big Jeffersonian Republicans? Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe. And guys, I want to point out too, I'm generalizing a bit here. When I say this party believes this, was that 100% of that party believe that? No. I mean, you look at it today, the vast majority of Democrats are pro-choice. But do you guys know there are millions, literally millions of pro-life Democrats? The majority of Republicans are pro-life. But do you know that there are literally millions of pro-choice Republicans? You see my point? So you can only take generalizing so far. Don't assume it's 100%. Does that make sense? We're generalizing, but this is a good generalization here. Now, guys, the Federalists, they view the future of America as big cities, manufacturing, industry. And the Federalists say that promotes freedom. Think about this a second. It's freedom. Brady, if we were dependent upon Europe for manufactured goods and we had to listen to their will, otherwise we wouldn't get their manufactured goods, wouldn't that be a loss on our freedom? Yeah! So the Federalists say, we need manufacturing. The future of America is cities, manufacturing, industry. The Jeffersonian Republicans say the future of America is small farms, being an agrarian society. Agrarian meaning like agriculture, farming. Caden. When you work in a factory, are you your own boss? No. Isn't that a loss of freedom? If you own your own small farm, that's your land, and you own it, who's your boss? I am. You're the boss of yourself. Isn't that freedom? Hey, we don't need to worry about manufactured goods. We'll be the breadbasket of Europe. All of Europe would be lined up to give us their manufactured goods for our tobacco and our cotton and our wheat and all of our other stuff we get from our farms. Oh yeah. Do you see how they both think they're the future of freedom? No, it's different, but neither one's necessarily wrong. They're right in their own way. You might agree more with one and disagree, but you see what I'm saying? Am I ready to scroll a little bit? Is that good? All right. That didn't go too far? Yeah, I can. Is that good? Oh, yeah. Now, guys, how do you slander them? What are the insults? How they insult Federalists is like this. They insult Federalists like this. Hey, Carter, you don't want to be a Federalist. Do you want to know why? Why? Oh, they're just aristocratic. They would like to take the aristocracy of Europe and bring it here. They just want privilege for the elites. They think the rich are better than the poor, and therefore they deserve more privileges. I can't believe it either. Don't vote Federalist. How do you slander the Jeffersonian Republicans? Eva? don't vote Jeffersonian Republican. They're for the masses. And if you think the masses are good, no, the masses are bad. You know what the masses are? The masses are riotous, uneducated buffoons, angry mobs riled up by a demagogue. And it's the French Revolution. Off with his head, off with his head, off with his head. That's the masses. The masses are to be feared, Eva. And they want to give the masses power. Tyranny of the 51% over the 49%. That's what they want. Do you like that, Carol Pepper? No, you don't, do you? No, you better not. Oh, hey, who should be our ally? The Federalists say our ally should be Great Britain. Remember, it's hard to be allies with both because they're constantly fighting, Britain and France in this time period. Who should be our ally? Great Britain. Hey, they're our parent country. Mama. And you know what? They're not just our parent country. We share the same culture. We share the same language. You know what? They're not just the parent country. We want to emulate them. England's the first industrialized country on earth. Don't we want industry like them if you're a Federalist? Yeah. Great Britain should be our ally. We need to be like them. No! The Jeffersonian Republicans say, hey, who should be our ally? France. They're a republic. We're a republic. Well, they're a republic until Napoleon becomes a dictator, but ignore that for a moment. They're a republic. We're a republic. Who helped us beat Britain in our Revolutionary War? Whose navy helped us? France. We owe them. Republics have to stick together against these monarchies. Don't we, Roshinsky? Did I go too far? Am I okay? I'm doing okay. What should the ideal government be? The Federalists say a strong national government, strong central government. A strong central government can bind these colonies before the Revolution into one powerful, effective government state. Federalists tend to support ratification of the U.S. Constitution. Federalists and large national government can help organize industry, help that manufacturing grow. No, says the Jeffersonian Republicans. No. You put too much power in one place, it becomes corrupt. You got to spread out power. Have a weak national government. Spread the power out. Generally speaking, the Jeffersonian Republicans reluctantly went along with the U.S. Constitution's ratification. They were fine with the Articles of Confederation. Now, guys, one big exception is James Madison. He's the father of the U.S. Constitution. But he's still a Jeffersonian Republican based on policies. But he wasn't reluctant about ratifying the Constitution. He was all for it. You see how you can't fit everyone into a box? Some of your kids might start paying attention to politics, and good for you. But if you identify with one party, maybe it's one of the big parties like the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, maybe it's a smaller party like the Libertarian Party or the Green Party or one of the other ones, that's okay. But don't feel like you have to check every box that party agrees with every time. You know what I mean? If you find yourself agreeing with everything that the politicians in your party say 100% of the time, maybe it's time to just step back and think a little bit more. I'm not saying you shouldn't ever agree with them. I'm just saying if you're always agreeing with everything a politician says in your party 100% of the time, you see what I'm saying? Is that fair or no? Especially since politicians contradict themselves a lot from thing to thing. Jonah's like, that never happens, Mr. Morris. Why do you not? Can I keep scrolling? Am I good? Kids? Okay. Right there's the end. We can do it, right? Are we good? We can do it. Kids are tough. Kids, geographic base of support. The Federalists are more in the Northeast. That's where that manufacturing's in its industry. That's where it's like a baby growing. The South, that's where the Jeffersonian Republicans are. The South, that's where more farming is happening. It's less diverse economy. It's more agricultural. The North is more mixed. Yeah, they got agriculture, but they also got manufacturing going. And so they're supporting manufacturing. That's where the Northeast is. They're supporting more farming. That's where the South is. How do you interpret the Constitution? Mr. Stent probably told you guys last year something along the lines of, it's nicknamed the Elastic Clause, but it's called the Necessary and Proper Clause. The Founding Fathers knew they were making a framework. They knew the U.S. Constitution couldn't spell out every situation, every scenario that could come up. So they say that the U.S. government can do anything that's necessary and proper to carrying out something that's expressly written. But how we interpret that could be different from one person to the next. For example, the U.S. Constitution says that the national government can make a currency and can, do things like tax. Well, wait a minute. Is it necessary and proper then to make a national bank? Well, it can help with those, can it? Right? And other people say, no, you're going too far. And other people say, no, you're not, that's okay. But so with the Federalists want a larger national government, remember? So they want to interpret this necessary and proper clause, nicknamed the Elastic Clause because you can expand the government. They want to interpret it loosely. They're loose constructionists. They believe the Constitution was constructed loosely so the government could expand as necessary and proper. Whereas the Jeffersonian Republicans want a weak national government. So they want to read the Constitution strictly. They're strict constructionists. They want the U.S. Constitution to be read strictly. Leave the powers that aren't expressly written to the states and individuals. Does that make sense, guys? Does that ring a bell with civics that you had? And guys, look, I don't have to scroll anymore, and then we're done. Look at that. Let's knock this out. Let's get done. Here we go. Kids, national bank. The Federalists support a national bank. Hey, a national bank can help strengthen the national government. It can help give out loans. Did Britain allow us to do a lot of manufacturing when we were colonies? No, Andrew, good job. Andrew's shaking his head. No, good job. They had some exceptions like shipmaking, but no, they didn't allow us. They didn't allow us our own manufacturing. Hey, maybe Daniela wants to start her own manufacturing business. They didn't allow us to have banking either, but now with the National Bank, you can get loans that can help grow industries, right? Help grow businesses. It can stabilize the currency, unify the government, provide large loans to build the country up. You see how a lot of the Federalist positions are just tied into one another, and a lot of the Jeffersonian Republican positions are just tied into one another? And look right here, National Bank. Jeffersonian Republicans, they oppose it. You're putting too much power in the hands of too few. You're just making the rich richer. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say you can have a national bank. If the Founding Fathers, and these are the Founding Fathers, if they wanted you to have a national bank, they would have said you can have a national bank in the Constitution. They didn't put it in there, so keep it out. Tariffs. Taxes on imported goods. Federalists love it. They support it. Hey, it's going to encourage industry. Remember, Nitya's going to start her factory, and then she's going to hire Hayden. That's good. Now we don't have to depend on Britain and France for manufactured goods, and here we got more jobs. That's good. That's good. Tariffs are great. No, the Jeffersonian Republicans say. No, we want to buy cheap goods, don't we, Dominic? We want to buy cheap crap. And you putting a tax on imported goods means we have to either pay the tax and buy it more expensively, or buy the American company, which is more expensive to begin with. Which one's right? That's for you to make up your own mind. And last but not least, the Federalists, they want national funding of internal improvements. I specifically use the phrase internal improvements because you might see it on a primary document called internal improvements. But all internal improvements are roads, bridges, canals. Later on in the 1800s, railroads, but not yet. Yeah, we should be paying for those. It connects the country. It binds the country up. It's good. Sometimes businesses don't have the money to make those things. And so the government needs to step in and make them. No, the Jeffersonian Republicans say. That's a state's obligation. Could the national government perfectly make the equal amount of bridges and roads in every state? No. So they're picking winners and losers. That's not fair. If a state wants a road or bridge, let them make it themselves. Otherwise, the federal government needs to stay out of road making, bridge making, canal making. That's the Jeffersonian Republican position. Yeah.
I'm just confused. If it's saying that it needs to stay out of that, wouldn't that be included in interstate commerce? So how is that not a congressional power?
There's different ways you can interpret it. That's a great question, Sachi. But here's one way to think about it. Interstate commerce, I'm talking as a Jeffersonian Republican, not as Mr. Morse. Does that make sense? Interstate commerce, that's making sure that states don't put tariffs on one another, something that they did under the Articles of Confederation. That's making sure that states don't put taxes on other states' business and other things like that. Now, when you're talking about building roads and bridges, that's not interstate commerce. That's a national government doing something the Constitution doesn't say it can do. Therefore, it's left up to the states to do. Do you understand that answer? Does that answer it? Yeah, I'm not saying I agree with it, but yeah. Any final thoughts about this, kids? Anyone, I'm not talking about today, 2022. Anyone, say for back then, late 1700s, early 1800s, do one of these pop out, like, if I lived back then, I would support that party? Carter?
I would probably say idealists, because I think that the industrializing and also support unifying is going to be a better option than having them be more split.
Okay. Anyone else want to talk? Tell me why you'd support one or the other party if you lived back then. No, that's fine. Now, kids, I did say that the Federalists die, then the Whigs pick up the same policy positions, then they die, then the modern Republican Party picks up the same policy positions. And you might be wondering, Mr. Morse, the modern Republican Party doesn't seem like they don't want to interpret the Constitution loosely. They don't want a big national government comparatively, and so forth. Why was that flip? Republican Party, their biggest voting bloc historically from their founding in 1854, and they still do very, very well in this demographic and tend to win it, not every election everywhere. Rural Northerners was their biggest voting bloc in 1854. Small towns, midtown. Remember, big cities were smaller back then. The rural North had a massive population back then, but the Republican Party has always done well in the rural north. Has always done well in the rural north. Always done well in the rural north. And if you're in the 1850s, 1860s, 1870s, 1880s, 1890s Republican, you're a rural northerner, or that's a big chunk of their voting bloc anyways. Don't you feel isolated before the years of satellite TV, internet, cell phones, before planes and automobiles and highways? Don't you feel isolated living out in the middle of nowhere? Don't you want the national government to connect you? Build roads, build canals, build bridges. Don't you want to be connected? And then the more modern Republican kind of mindset is, which is still their big voting demographic, one of the biggest voting demographics is rural northerners, is we're connected enough. Now we kind of want the national government to kind of stay out of our business. We're kind of out here, leave us alone kind of type thing. Does that kind of make sense now? You see how the Republican Party has always done well with rural northerners. Always done well with rural northerners. Make sense? All right, kids, I'm going to stop this.